Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. I'm Molly Herford.
And I'm Peter Glassford.
And today, when we're not fighting about the proper way to make espresso, we are going to do another Q&A episode. Although the espresso fight did just take up a lot of our time.
Yeah, it is. It's sort of the nature of coffee. It takes up a lot of time.
I mean, I guess it's sort of similar to training. There are many ways to go about doing it. And
I don't know if that's true for espresso.
I rest my case. Anyway, we are finally back in Ontario. We've had a pretty long few months, although the past week has been a little lower key than the first bit of September, which was pretty much wall-to-wall with travel. Thankfully, we had that active travel episode out, so we could kind of take our own advice.
Yeah, we just got back. We were doing in Boston for one of our 3-part talks, which went well.
Yeah, that was over at the Ride Studio Cafe's Ride headquarters, which is their new place over in Sherbourne, which is a really cool little shop.
Yeah, they're doing lots of group rides, and they have coffee set up.
French presses for days.
Yeah, so people can they're really focusing on building the community side of it, and they do 7 bikes is sort of their main brand there, so lots of custom stuff. And really,
that's a type of bike, not a number of bikes.
Yes, yeah. So a really cool shop, really nice people. I think everyone was pretty receptive to our 3-part idea with the Saddle Sore book, and then Molly's Fuel Your Ride, and then also a bit of training stuff, sort of, common missteps that athletes make, and, how we fit all this training into busy lifestyles as quote-unquote normal people. So, yeah, some really good talking points, really good questions, some good challenges there. I always like when things get a little tense for a little bit, and then we come out of it. So
he likes that. I'm, huddled in the corner, rocking back and forth. Just, I don't want to fight.
Yeah, so that was good. So it's been busy on the road and stuff, but we've been trying to be moving lots, and we've both been trying some variation of a daily core routine in the morning right when we wake up to just sort of make sure we get that in, and it's been good.
Actually, so yeah, on that note, I kind of wanted to go back to that really ridiculous travel block we did. So we had a talk in Chicago on Thursday. We had racing that we were supporting for the Trek CXC Cup over in Madison, Wisconsin, and then we flew out I flew and Peter drove out to Las Vegas for Interbike and Cross Vegas, and then we went straight from there to the Jingle Cross World Cup, all before finally getting back after 10 days and going right into a very important interview for both of us. So that actually, I think, was the healthiest time that I've had in the past 2 months, though, weirdly. And I think part of that was because I was so focused on not getting sick and on staying healthy during that block that, my eating was spot on. I was doing all of my stretching and my training and all that stuff just perfectly. Trying so hard to mitigate some of the, travel stuff. And then I came home and sort of fell apart for a few days.
Yeah, you got a little cold.
Got an actual cold, not got chilly. So I had a bit of a cold. I was definitely oh, thank goodness I'm finally home and I can sleep a bunch, but then I can also go out to eat and maybe have that extra cookie that I wasn't having when we were on the road, and I was really good with okay, greens powder and, need a salad with every meal.
Yeah, you had posted about Interbike, the big bike show, and making sure you have a vegetable every meal, so you had to make sure you were doing that.
When you post about it on your blog, you sort of have to do it in real life, which actually worked out really slick, was just making sure every meal that I had that week had a vegetable in it or with it, which is a pretty simple thing, really. It's asking for a side of steamed vegetables at the easiest.
And you'd have your oatmeal and a green pepper.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, stuffed oatmeal?
Yeah.
Stuffed peppers with oatmeal?
Stuffed pepper oatmeal.
Yeah. I did not do that. That's gross. And just was making sure to drink a lot of water, and yeah, I think I was just really on top of things there. So, I don't know. I guess, what did you learn in that crazy travel week? I have a couple thoughts.
I don't really want to be a truck driver, but it was good.
But if you had to be.
Got to spend a lot of time with Brandon, who's one of the mechanics on the team we help out there. So he's a good coach over at Wattage Cottage if you want to check him out. But we had lots of good talks about coaching and athletes, and sort of we'd be we're both coaches as well as doing sort of these little side projects. So just talking, we'd be talking to athletes and then sort of going back and forth on, different ideas. And I think probably that was one of I don't know if there's probably other learnings to travel, but I think from that experience, just being able to talk to someone else, right? Rather, I think a lot of times when you're in a field with someone, you sort of get standoffish and don't want to share, but I think he would agree with me. We both sort of like have different approaches, but you come away and you say, okay, well, we have this issue, this athlete has this, goal and this problem, and then, they could have a completely different look at, or, they would try something, their first inkling is different, right? And so that idea of, whatever you want to call it, a mastermind group or a mentor or a peer group or, something like that. I think that meetup, I guess, would be the other hashtag. I think there's a lot of benefit to that. So
funny enough, I think that's actually a lot of what we've been doing with the podcast too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. Having everyone. We just did today's, as we're recording this, we did one with another golf episode, and we had a golf coach on, but still that same different philosophies of coaching and methods of explaining a skill to someone.
Exactly. Yeah, pretty cool. And then actually for the truck drivers who are listening to this potentially, were there anything, I know you were really into the stretching while either sitting in the passenger seat or...
While not driving.
Not driving.
Wink.
This was not dangerous.
Yeah, I think just moving. Like, I'm always a fidgeter, which is, I guess, beneficial in the long term. So, like, I start going crazy and get super grumpy if I can't move significantly in a day, which you would classify probably as addiction, but I'm not super bad addiction, I guess.
Yeah.
When controlled, but in a van it gets really hard. So things like when I'm gassing up the car, I will start doing burpees.
Lunges.
Or usually I'll do lunges because they're pretty easy to do while you're holding the gas thing. A lot of the middle states you can actually clip the gas thing, so now you can start doing more vigorous calisthenics. But
otherwise it gets kind of Zoolandery where they're like spraying the gasoline all over in the beginning.
Yeah, I guess true. So yeah, just trying to open up those hips when we do the gas stop. So I'll usually try and do 20 to 50 sort of lunges each side while we're filling up. Those tanks are big, so you get a lot of lunges in. If you have like a little Suzuki Swift or something, you're not gonna get quite as many. But and then just arms overhead. In the Sprinter van we were driving, it was nice because they had full size, like we easily could get those arms overhead. So again, just trying to get those joints through some range of motion, and then just fiddle, like try and not be comfortable, right? Don't let yourself sink in. I like putting my one tip is the rear view mirror, which isn't that important because we couldn't have it in the van,
yeah, you
so it
can't
didn't
actually
work.
see
But
through it.
positioning your mirrors, because hopefully you're checking your mirrors frequently, so that you have to be sitting upright somewhat, and
Okay.
you might slump down, but then you have to sit up. And I think that's the big thing, is not getting so comfortable that you stop fidgeting and adjusting, because that's where you're going to get sort of stuck in one posture. Not that sitting up straight is necessarily any better, but that you're sort of switching around and getting forced to switch around.
I like that. Yeah, I think actually stretching is one of the big things I've figured out. And I mean, like we said, we've been doing some more core. I do about 5 minutes of different plank stuff, just going kind of from one to the other. So by the end of 5 minutes, you're kind of burning all over. And then I do, a quick set of yoga that I've talked about a bunch. I think actually it's been almost a year now since I've been doing like 5 to 10 minutes of yoga every day. And I really do feel like it makes me feel better. It wakes me up more. And it was just sort of a nice, kind of kickstart to the day, whether it was going to be crazy and I wasn't going to have time to train or I'd have time to train later. I think it kept me a little more sane, for sure. So yeah, just trying to find 5 minutes. Because, I mean, I know we say like, oh my gosh, we were super busy at Interbike and we were doing this, this, and this. But I mean, 5 minutes, really not that hard to carve out.
No, it's true. And I have a couple clients that have been giving me pushback. They wake up really early, and there certainly is that time where you have to assess, are you waking up so early that those extra 10 minutes matter? But, a lot of times it's like, do you need to spend 10 minutes on your phone in the morning, or, they're not eating breakfast anyhow, maybe. And it's just like, it's one of those things, like there's time there, there's a way to to get it in. And, you know, some of the clients we've decided that it's going to be more of a like before dinner when they get home, like right when they get in the door, but pairing it so that the reason the morning works is that you haven't been distracted by your phone or the emails, and you just directly go and do it. And then that way, you know, and it happens after a few days, like you wake up and you start doing this routine, right? And you're a little groggy for the first few. And
so that's where my HRV app comes in, because it gives me the 3 minutes extra of laying in bed.
Did you have an HRV app?
I have an HRV. Well, I don't have an HRV app, but one of our first guests, Marco Altini, does have an HRV app. We have a whole episode on HRV, but that's sort of been my pairing of like two new habits, or one old and one new habit. So I do my HRV and then I get into my core and stretching.
And I mean, that's a routine, but I think like you, which I hate, but you usually watch some sort of trashy show or comedy routine while you're doing it. So for you.
Not the HRV.
I think that's, what? No, for the core routine.
Yeah.
But for when you're talking about pairing habits, so like Molly likes watching these comedy routines or rewatching Frasier or something. So
Frasier.
It's Canadian, Fraser. So anyhow, she pairs that watching with, again, doing some sort of yoga or core or whatever. And then again, at least she's not, you know, you're not adding to your sitting.
It's it's a little bit more of a nice start to the morning because I'm doing something that I actually enjoy doing and then something that's good for me. My point about the HRV is largely that it gives me an extra 3 minutes to lay in bed before I like get up and roll onto the floor, like, you know, military, like tuck and roll, like spring out of bed and like jump into core. It's 3 minutes of breathing and like kind of quiet meditation, and then I'm a little bit more awake and aware and ready to jump into core.
Yeah, I mean, however, if it's like, it doesn't have to be whatever way, but I mean, finding a time where it sort of happens automatically. So it could easily be, you know, some clients do it right before they do their bike workout, and it's just sort of their warm-up preparation for their bike, and that, you know, probably has good support as well. So
for sure. All right, so that's sort of some updates on travel, I guess, and a bit on our core routine. But I wanted to, before we get into some reader questions, I recently was lucky enough at Cross Vegas, actually, to get to interview Sven Nys. And I did a quick article on him for Bicycling Magazine.
Now, hold up. This is the Consummate Athlete, so not everyone.
Oh, that's true. Oh my gosh, like, I'm so used to
Sven Nys is a household name.
Everyone immediately squeals after his name in most of our circles. But so Sven Nys is multiple-time cyclocross world champion, hundreds of UCI wins, arguably the most famous cyclocrosser in the world. Belgian. He retired this year, but he's still working with the Telenet Fidea team as sort of their team director. So he was actually in the pit for a bunch of younger racers. So he's really, you know, he shifted from being this, you know, ultra pro. I mean, in Belgium, cyclocross is NASCAR, right? Like their pro cyclocross racers are in tabloids and have reality shows. It's crazy. So to see him transition into, you know, this team director, coach, kind of mentor for younger racers has been really cool to watch and talk to him about. So I did a quick interview for Bicycling Magazine, and then I actually got a short podcast with him on some of his best tips for getting into cross and crushing it in cyclocross. But one of the things I really, really loved was I asked him how someone could be a pro cyclocross racer, or like what a junior needs to think about. And he said, you have to live 365 days a year for your sport. That helps a lot, not just doing it for a small period. You need to have the passion from day one until the last day. And I just really loved that kind of reminder about having a passion for sport and, you know, just being so in love with what you're doing that you wake up psyched to do it every day. And Peter actually had written a newsletter on that a few weeks ago now. Sort of to that point.
Which one are you talking about?
The one where you talked about having, you know, a deep love of your sport and being passionate about it and needing to kind of keep that feeling in order to stay in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's, you know, I think I referenced that a lot, but what we might call like internal motivation, or
Yeah.
not being motivated by the money or the prize, which I think is hard, especially for the younger
Or
riders.
the result, even, like if we're going to back off prize money.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the result, or other people, saying you're doing a good job. Like, you need to wake up and, be addicted to riding your bike or whatever it is, right? Like, it needs to be just inherently fun. And I think that's what I look for in athletes is, if they don't have any training up for the day, do they go and ride their bike, or do they go and like...
Do you have to beg them to stop riding their bike?
Like, is it homework, or is that like they're out, maybe not even riding their bike, like training per se, but they, go slice some mountain bike trails, or they're like practicing their, like hopping on a picnic table in the backyard, right? And that like inherent, just like they need to be on, in that case, 2 wheels, or they need to be, practicing their karate or whatever, it just needs to be part of that's what you do, right? Like,
yeah, for sure. On that
default.
On that karate note, let's get into reader questions before you butcher more pronunciations or embarrass us further. So our first reader question was actually about gaining weight after coming back from illness and severe weight loss, or just losing, kind of going a bit under what that ideal race weight is. So I guess the first question kind of goes to that ideal race weight. How do you know when you're at that like under ideal race weight?
The ideal race weight.
I've caught you slightly unaware here. I mean, I think it's when performance starts suffering.
And we're talking specifically to cycling, though.
No, I think we could be talking running, triathlon, all that kind of stuff. Like, most endurance sports have that. And I mean, honestly, even sort of weightlifting and like weight class type sports as well.
Yeah, you're going to have norms. And I mean, you can look those up. Most of the time, there's usually like some sort of training manual for a sport that's going to show you. I mean, you can also look at the ranges in a sport. I think you always have to be careful assuming that like you can't succeed, and usually there are people who are outliers. So I think we always have to be careful. Like, there are taller people or shorter people who succeed.
Sure.
And they just have a different technique or a different strategy, right?
Yeah.
But there's going to be norms, right? So I think the key thing to ask before we get too crazy about weight, and this is, the Dean Gollage podcast was, we talked about power to weight, which is one of the big things that people get maybe too excited about. And that's what Dean's thought was, that he doesn't even really care that much, because if people are, to our point about embracing the sport, if they're embracing the sport and riding a lot, training, then those things should take care of themselves. And so that's the important thing is, are you succeeding? Are you progressing at the pace we would expect? And 2, if not, are you, like, why? Because often before we even talk about losing weight, there's a lot of people who are under fueling, which could relate to being overweight still, because work capacity is so important. So I think it's important to differentiate that, like, fuel is important to work capacity.
So it's not necessarily that someone is underweight that's the problem. It might be that they're underfueled, and the weight's sort of a byproduct of that.
Well, especially if you're underweight, that would make sense.
Well, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I think in a global discussion of like racing weight, to steal a Matt Fitzgerald, a book worth reading as well.
Absolutely, one of my favorites.
And that's, he deals with that, I would say both those topics, but his is probably more looking at the getting down to racing weight, because that's sort of your more common dilemma. But usually what you'll see with someone who's underweight is that there is some sort of either, there could be an overtraining, so maybe training too much relative to the amount that you're willing to eat or able to eat, or that your body will absorb. So there's something there that's not quite adding up. And so you just, it's just the next thing you need to challenge, because your work capacity is going to be affected. Now, if you're trying to gain weight, like, you're fine, you're, functioning, you feel good, but you're trying to gain weight because you want to be a power lifter, which we have an upcoming podcast on that, so we can maybe talk a little bit to them. You're trying to gain mass for, whatever. Like, I've been in that boat trying to put on 10 pounds for mountain biking just to increase the amount of power that I could put out, seated power and stuff. So there's certainly ways to go about that with strength training and with, paying attention to just eating a bit more.
Yeah, I think this guy in particular is talking about, like, he, was sick and dropped way under where he's comfortable.
Right. Yeah, and that was, if I recall right, that was the question.
Yeah, coming back from illness. I mean, he's also said generally losing too much weight from training, but
yeah,
I think that's two kind of different questions almost, because the losing too much weight from training sort of corrects itself if you just, like, correct your calories and
usually people just need to back off a little, and again, make sure that you're focused on the things that actually affect performance. So that's usually intensity and, like, practicing the skills of your sport. And while volume is beneficial, it's rarely the big thing, especially when someone's underweight. Like, if anything, you're driving yourself into a hole, and, like, I've been there. Like, you're driving yourself into a hole. So
yeah, and I mean, I think coming back from illness, the answer is almost the same but slower, right? Like, you're just not going to be able to jump right back to your regular training or even slightly back off your regular training. You're going to have to, if you're a runner, you're going to have to start by walking and then hiking and then run walking. Like, so you're already going to have to be doing that kind of stuff. But you're also not supposed to, you shouldn't just automatically increase your calories to, like, 8,000 a day and drink a ton of milkshakes either. Like, again, the weight gain should be slow weight gain, so you're not gaining just, like, a ton of fat and having a bunch of excess calories, like junk calories.
Yeah, I mean, again, it shouldn't match work capacity, and that might be slightly over work capacity, what you're putting out to gain weight. But yeah, I mean, if you're coming back from illness, I would expect your body to normalize itself if you just give it, like, a slow ramp up on both calories and on the amount of activity you're doing.
Yeah.
And then if you are someone who's having trouble getting food in, which is very common, like a lot of my clients, especially as they transition, like, from the juniors to the, elite level, or they're going from sport to expert, there's just more work capacity, so you need to eat more. And a lot of people, have some sort of, they might have a mental blockage, they don't want to eat more because they don't want to gain weight. And they might just not be able to stomach, like, the amount of food. Like, it sounds like, you get to eat so much food, but it's a job at a certain point, and
for sure.
That's maybe a cliche thing to say, but it's a lot of food. And so you need to be on top of, like, figuring out how you're going to have that much food in the house, and it's not all going to be crappy food. So learning to, do tons of portions. I always say pretend your family's twice the size, and just, you're going to have leftovers all the time. So then you have, like, your chicken and salad and sweet potatoes and stuff all from last night, and you can have that for second breakfast or lunch or snack in the afternoon or pre-dinner or post-dinner or additive to dinner. You have all these really good options on hand. So preparing your food so that you have the food to eat is a big thing that I think is overlooked. And then I think just going to more palatable foods. A lot of times the underweight people are the salad people. So going to foods that are just a little more calorically dense, so your rices, maybe having some liquid calories, certainly post-workout getting, that's a time you could have a smoothie and then have a meal an hour later, right? Like, things that are going to get, we can all eat a whole bag of chips, but don't eat a whole bag of chips. But, there's certain foods that you can eat a lot and not get full, but, like, a salad we usually use to get down.
To drop weight,
So you just need to do the opposite. So what I would suggest is, rather than eating your salad first, you actually flip the meal, and you have, the amount of sweet potato or rice that you require, have your meats, and then, finish off with some salad. And that way you should be able to get it all in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing is the macronutrients, like making sure you're getting in enough protein, for sure. I think that's a big one, especially when you're dealing with, underweight people, kind of even going over the, standard, like, 80-ish grams a day, aiming for more like 100 or so.
Yeah, I mean, I always go back to just using the sort of palm of your hand type thing, and, that way you can adjust that, right? So if you just keep track today using, and this is sort of a precision nutrition, is sort of who I've, used and who my certification is through. And so basically you can start, say if you're a female, you would start with, 4 meals in the day, and you'd have one palm of protein. And if you're still feeling not as good and you're not, at the weight you want, then you would increase that to maybe 2 palms of protein, right? So you're going to double it. Say it's a big increase, but you might do that, or add another meal. And then that way we have this rough admittedly rough, but you could really debate any calorie counting you're doing is pretty rough.
Yeah,
as well.
for sure.
So yeah, you have your couple eggs, and you can keep track of that pretty easily. And yeah, I think the protein's a nice one to do that way. But yeah, I mean, you can do the same thing with cupped handfuls of carbohydrate. You can do the same thing with cupped handfuls of vegetable too.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I would say on this is if you're just trying to increase your caloric load while keeping it like pretty healthy, I would actually be upping my fat intake versus my, carbs necessarily, especially if you're not someone who likes eating large volumes of things. Because a tablespoon of coconut oil is pretty easy to
It is.
sneak in.
It's tough. There'd be some people that would maybe help, but some people too are gonna. Because you can go. There's some strategies where you'd have like a spoonful of olive oil between meals, and it really like satiates and it's sort of disgusting. So it sort of makes you not want to eat, right? So
yeah.
Yes, it's more calorically dense, but it also should theoretically fill you up and then make you not want to eat subsequently. So, whereas again, if you had, even a bowl of rice, again, this is
more probably putting the coconut oil on the rice versus.
Yeah, you could. Again, you get into sort of intricacies there, but the example would be if you have a snack of, another bowl of rice. We're trying to get more calories in. So at 10 a.m. you have another, bowl of rice with some coconut milk even, or almond milk, or almond milk and berry. So it's pretty easy to eat that. Then you can still have lunch. So you just add that snack in. But if you had like, again, a bunch of coconut oil, then you might not be able to stomach that subsequent meal.
Sure.
It's hard to say. And then we also get into maybe which one's better, which one's going to fuel the training and stuff as well. So yeah, I think either choice is good, and if you need to add food, then you need to add it. So if you can stomach, if it's easy to do a spoonful of coconut oil.
I would point out that I would never suggest that because it seems gross.
I've seen people, certainly something like peanut butter is another one that people can house a whole thing.
That's
so
true.
If I had to gain, and that's what I do honestly, is things like dairy and peanut butter, like you can house that stuff. I can house that stuff. So that's what I do, is I either don't eat dairy when I want to get lighter, or I add it in when I'm, just trying to maintain or even gain. And that's, the classic drink a gallon of milk is like how a weightlifter or
oh my gosh, that's so like 1980s.
Yeah, but it's still very current. It stimulates growth. Like that's what the dairy does. Like that's why whey protein is our recovery, protein of choice. So,
and milk versus anything else has been shown to reduce this like DOMS, the delayed onset muscle soreness, in a way that even whey protein doesn't.
Yeah, I guess I don't know that I've seen that.
I assure you, ask Oliver Woodard.
I don't know who that is.
A Scottish researcher or British researcher.
Yeah, generally the whole food should be better, right? Like, it's going to have additive effects, right? No different than taking vitamin C versus, eating nice berries or something are going to be nicer.
I'll include a link to that study in the show notes.
That would be super. I'll make sure to read that. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So let's move on. I think that's enough on gaining weight.
Yeah. Most people probably just skipped over this section anyway.
Yeah. I think it's beneficial because most people might skip over it, but there's a lot of people who aren't performing the way they could be because they're not eating enough. And that could be, eating enough salad and stuff too. But yeah, there's a lot of people that are under eating, and they might also be overweight. That's possible. But if you do need to lose weight, you can reverse. Don't, eat the salad first and the rice second. Yeah, exactly. Reverse that and try and cut down on the amount of white rice and coconut and, peanut butter and dairy.
Anything we suggested for weight gain.
Yeah, like I would just cut peanut butter and dairy out and tell me in a month if you've lost weight or not, and, go from there.
Fair enough.
So what's our next one?
All right. Our friend Vince said he'd love some down-to-earth advice on getting into interval training. He says, I've always just tried to maintain a pace while running, but I'm aware that interval training will yield better results. But how does one establish intervals as a beginner? So that's actually an awesome question, because I think a lot of people who aren't working with a training plan will pretty much, I do it, just go out and run and not really see much progression.
Yeah, and intervals take some motivation to do, right? Like you need to have a purpose to do that. And so I think that's the biggest thing is like, what is Vince trying to do? Because that's going to motivate those intervals, I think.
Sure. I mean, I don't think he necessarily has one specific goal in mind other than get faster, though.
Yeah, so I mean, if you want to go faster, like, especially with running, I mean, running really quickly is a good way to get better at running. Because it's going to really force your body to be efficient, right? And you're actually going to run. So for a lot of people to, like, their slow all-day pace, their 1 hour run or 45-minute run is pretty common. So, I mean, you're going to get better doing that until you won't. And you only have, how much does a normal, 5 to 8 hours of running time in a week, say. So the easiest way to do interval training to me is, day one, call it a Tuesday, you're going to go out and instead of running your 45-minute loop, why don't you walk for a minute and then run for a minute and just run faster? So that could be by feeling, which is probably better. Just run harder, Run for that minute, focus on that 1 minute, and then walk for a minute. And then, again, focus on 1 minute. And you'll find that you actually start feeling really smooth and your form, especially in running, is really, really good because you're so focused on just that minute. And it could be any duration. It doesn't matter. It could be 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. It could be.
And it makes you readjust, right?
Yeah, and so what we're trying to do is get a different pace in there and a different intensity so that you're sort of stimulating that body. You're going to get breathing hard. That's the purpose. Again, sometimes we don't realize that we're actually supposed to be breathing hard and sweating, ideally, quite often. And so just doing that in a different way. So the easiest way, run, walk. Perfect. That's an easy way, and that's going to change it up and the loads on your body. You're going to get some walking stuff.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people freak out about run, walk because they're like, I'm not a beginner runner.
Yeah, I would run, walk all the time. Like, I mean, people do it, professional track athletes do it all the time, right? Like they're, running the 100 and then they'll walk or jog. I mean, once you're super fit, you could definitely jog, but a lot of us aren't that fit at running. The difference is not that great. Like we're basically running as hard as we can, or we're walking. But once you can do 5-minute miles, and you're a marathon superstar, then you might adjust this, and certainly you'll be doing more advanced intervals. But again, for the sake of really differentiating run to walk, try that. Walking is different. So walk for a minute, run for a minute, simple intervals. The other thing I would say to add is, the traditional fartlek or just like a hilly run. So go off-road, which a lot of people haven't even explored yet, and run or hike really hard up the climbs and then sort of carefully get your way down the descents and learn that descending quick sort of agility ladder method to get down your technical descents, and then, just do your regular jog pace on the flats. And the terrain is going to make you, that's the idea of the fartlek or the speed play, is it's sort of random, but you're going to get the hill is going to make it harder. And you could do the same thing on a hilly run route too. The hills are going to make you go harder, so go harder on the hills and sort of enjoy the coasting on the way down. And that could be for any sport again.
Yeah, I think the fartlek is probably my favorite because it means I can still listen to whatever podcast I'm listening to or whatever music I'm listening to and not really focus on like timing anything. Mm-hmm. But I'm still sort of sneaking in the sprint work and the speed.
Sure, and I mean, I went out and I've been doing this the last couple weeks. I really like hill running up and down. So we have two examples of that. We have a really short hill close to the house here. So I would do some run drills, butt kickers and so forth, ABCs, a couple lunges, and just sort of walk my way towards that hill. It takes maybe 15 minutes to get there when I'm doing all these butt kickers and odd walking down the subdivision road to the entertainment of the neighbors. Get to the hill, and then I run as hard as I can up the hill, which takes about 30 seconds. And I've been watching that time and sort of how fast it goes throughout the workout. So that's the nice thing about interval training is you get that feedback. So every week I can go a little faster, a little further up the hill. And then I can also see within the workout how that's changing. How's my pacing, right? So for me, I have to push myself to not pace really well. But most clients, what we're pushing for is, can we do every one at 30 seconds, or do we fade and the last one's at 40 seconds, right? Because that's going to translate to a race or a run situation in a group or something. And then the other example is we have a bigger mountain or hill near us that's about 10 minutes for me to run up really fast, and I've been going there and doing sort of more of a threshold interval. So I do 3 times up it, really hard, just delirious, hidden max heart rate last week when I did it, which was good to see. It means sort of I'm getting recovered. For me, it's nice if I can get close to that max heart rate. So really, like those, I have to get amped up for those days and take a good off day beforehand for sure. But 3x10, and then I just sort of negotiate myself back down the hill. So the recoveries are maybe longer than I would like ideally, but again, I'm just letting the terrain dictate that and really focusing on getting a little delirious on the way up. And there's lots of agility work and coordination and a bit of danger up and down because it's pretty rocky. So yeah, it's really engaging and really, again, takes some motivation. Like, it's not something that I necessarily even look forward to per se, but the fitness boost you get from those is huge, and the variety on the uphill and downhill running, again, is going to really challenge that body, and I think is really worth doing. So hopefully that helped. That was a pretty running specific example. You can definitely transfer that into like a weightlifting type scenario or core workout. You just move faster for a minute, chill for 30 seconds, right? That's pretty common in the strength training conditioning world. So
yeah, I think the last thing though is also just if you're having more of a motivation and like making yourself do it kind of issue versus just like how to do it, finding any kind of group that's doing like a track workout or a hill workout. There's a bunch of different adult running groups or riding groups or whatever sport you're doing.
You could check out our episode with Kyle Boersma as well. They're the really successful track running program that might get you amped to go and check your local track club. Or just running group club. They're going to do some sort of hill workout. They're going to do some sort of sprint workout for sure. Yeah, there's a reason. As well as the long runs.
Yeah, there's a reason masters swimmers do masters swim class.
Sure.
Show up at the pool at 4 a.m. and it's because the camaraderie and stuff of, being in the pool with a bunch of people versus by yourself forces them to actually go faster.
For sure.
So.
And I mean, yeah, even just finding another person to run with is going to give you some sort of interval training.
Yeah, right? So. Exactly. When they're feeling good, you're probably not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Next question is from Brandon, and he was asking about strength training in the off season, just sort of like the why, how, and when, and says it's still a mystery for a lot of athletes.
Yep. And I'll try and be quick on this one. I don't know if that's possible, but my feeling is that most people are not elites. So we have to find other ways to train. And often this will open up a whole other window of time because we can do it while the kids are in the house or, again, we can fit it into the morning just before we go to work instead of going on Twitter. Or while we're watching TV in the evening. So the core training offers another way to increase work capacity. Again, that's a word I use a lot. We're just trying to have a lot of work capacity. It might not be all specific work capacity, but we're able to produce a lot of energy during the day. So look at weight training as another way to increase your work capacity. It also offers you, again, as a normal person, maybe an aging person. I don't know if you're aging or not, but you might be.
I feel like you might have just insulted somebody pretty badly there.
The person who's not aging? I know I'm aging.
I'm not. 23 for life.
So anyhow, what it's going to do is it's going to help armor your body, right? We all need some sort of bone density going into old age, muscle mass as we go into old age. So again, we're not all on that performance. We have this longevity concern, we have this health concern. And so we want to have some of this stuff sort of shored up as well as looking at our sport specific stuff. So you need to be thinking about that bone mass, or bone density rather, and then that muscle mass as you age. And it doesn't have to mean you're like, I'm not saying get super muscle bound, but I'm saying you need to have some sort of muscle. You can't be like basically walking around with femurs all over the place.
You don't want to look like Chris Froome.
Yeah, you need quads and you need, a bit of upper body strength. You need shoulders that function. So to that point, we also need to be able to have joints that function throughout old age. So again, none of us, certainly no cyclists that I've met, have perfectly functioning shoulders. So again, working on that stuff because you're going to want to put stuff up on a shelf when you get, to be into your later ages here. And
that wasn't like putting something on a shelf in like a metaphorical sense. You meant that like literally being able to put a book like up on a shelf.
Yeah, exactly. So like lifting stuff up and, preserving those activities of daily living, right? Like the example they always give is like, can you wipe your own butt when you're 70? And that sounds maybe graphic, but that ability to reach behind you, maybe touch your hands behind your back, the classic, sort of test, can you touch your hands behind your back?
Can you touch your butt?
can you wipe your own butt, right? So there's a lot of stuff there, that thoracic mobility, that sort of stuff. So there's all these little elements we can fit into that. And then lastly, again, related to regular people having lots going on, I don't know how many of my clients have injured themselves, not necessarily picking their babies up, but their babies, especially it seems like younger male babies like to go and like jump at dad when he gets in from his big century ride, and then all of a sudden we have a thrown out back or something, right? So just, again, activities of daily living, but like armoring ourselves so that we don't hurt ourselves during the day. And that could be, any variety of things. Maybe a slip and fall we could have avoided because we have decent balance on one leg, or, just been a little stronger. The example I always use is, can you put your arm over your head? Because someday you're going to fall and your arm's going to get forced over your head, and that'll either tear a rotator cuff or maybe it won't. So I think it's, even before, and I haven't even mentioned performance adaptations for cycling or for your sport, but there's a lot of reasons to strength train year-round because of that.
So I think that just answered the why and the when. So we're not just talking about the off-season. The off-season might be a good time to start if you're new to strength training and you didn't want to sabotage your season by trying something completely different midway through. So now, actually, for most athletes, right around now would be the start of the off season anyway. So it's a good time to start, but it by no means should be the only time during the year. You shouldn't be starting from zero every year.
No, and I think a lot of sports, if you look at the highest levels, they're certainly strength training year round, and this is periodized. I'm not necessarily saying go ahead and do a full max strength session the week of, but it's not irregular to see some sort of very heavy lifting week of the event. You're seeing some stuff with a preconditioning or priming effect even the morning of or just before certain sports. So again, we're all familiar with doing some openers the night before, the morning of before a cycling race. Again, some hard efforts to get sort of the heart rate up and stuff. So looking at some of these studies have looked at doing a heavy set of squats or jumps even before we go and do, again, a cycling effort or a, more specific to a high jump effort or something like this. And that actually being beneficial. And that makes sense. Again, if you think about this, same thing we would do on the bike, we'd maybe do a sprint or even a low RPM sort of, seated sprint to just get muscles activated. The strength training or jump training could also have some sort of priming effect. So I don't see any downside to having muscles functioning well.
For sure.
Year round. And so thinking about it, and you don't want it to be so irregular that you're sore, but maintaining strength once you have it. It could be one set of 5 on your squat on a Tuesday, and you're racing on the Saturday, Sunday in the competition phase, and you're going to maintain that, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually leads to kind of the last topic we wanted to touch on, just sort of the off-season in general. And I think this is a particularly good time because so many athletes are hitting their off-season and I feel aren't really sure of what to do or how to play it. And I know you've been dealing with a lot of your athletes lately that are sort of ending their competition for the year and just not really sure where to go with it. So, yeah, what are some of your kind of initial thoughts when someone says okay, it's my off-season now?
To actually take a time off their sport, but not so much time, would be my summary.
Because I think you probably have people fall into two camps, right? You have the ones that want to just keep going and just never stop training because they're terrified of losing fitness.
Yep.
Or you have the ones that are just really stoked to take 4 months off and sit on the couch and gain that off-season non-race weight.
Yeah, and I mean, again, most of us are not making millions of dollars and are super elite, right? So, yeah, I think your categorization is good. I think there's probably a optimal one in the middle where there's some athletes who, have fatigued themselves sufficiently, are ready for a small break, but are not so burnt out that they're ready to get back on their bike whenever it's time. But
I don't think I've ever been that middle ground.
I feel like I did a good job. I probably have extra energy. I'm not really on that this year, but yeah, so it's sort of like finishing a race, right? Or some sort of big effort. You'll have the people who went way too hard and collapsed maybe before the finish line. Mm-hmm. So we've all been there. You've had the June burnouts, or there's some other, what are the terms I'm looking for? Spring champions or
Oh yeah.
It'd be like golfing and in the hockey league and stuff, or football. You go golfing in the summer because you've gotten kicked out of the playoffs or something, right? But those, or January, is it like a January champion? There's some sort of term for this or something. Spring hero, something like this.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah, so I mean, if you come out really hard, just like a race, you're probably going to fade, and you're probably going to go a little too deep, and you might not get to that key, late August, September race. So pacing your season appropriately so that you expend the energy when it's there, and then need a little break, but we also want to expend that energy, right? So we want to need a little bit of a break. So I usually encourage athletes to take at least a week, maybe 2 off. If someone's got obvious overtraining, hormonal issues, they're super stressed, they've had injuries the entire season, then that's going to be more so. But we don't want to take like maybe a couple slothful days, maybe you're going to go on vacation, whatever, go to the cottage, finish off the summer. But you need to get back at it and be a normal person and start working on your, getting ramped up on some strength training. Again, very light body weight, doing some yoga. If you have a foot injury or a hand injury or shoulder injury that you've been nursing, we need to start back at that. That's going to mean going to physio probably. It's going to mean doing exercise every day. So starting back so that when this is what I would call the preparation phase, taking care of all those little excuses so that when we get to the base phase, whenever that starts, and I would say base is a general term that people are familiar with that, but not everyone would necessarily go into like high endurance volume. But when we get back to quote unquote real training, specific training, maybe you don't have those excuses. So the off season question would be take a week maybe, but then get back at this preparation phase, which could be 6-8 weeks. Again, clients always get like, oh no, I needed time off. Well, use variety, like cross train, strength train, go walk with your family or go on group rides or, have fun on your mountain bike. This all counts, but it doesn't have to be super structured. But like we need to get back working on skills, shoring up any of those excuses / injuries, while still building motivation back up. By not being super structured or whatever is taxing to the athlete's motivation.
Yeah. No, I really like that one. We've talked about considering limiters. So I know for me right now, I'm working with a naturopath and we're, dealing with some hormonal stuff and, figuring out some of my digestive issues and like my gut health. And we're trying really hard to get that all like 100% sorted out before like I fully get into base for Ironman training because we're doing Ironman BC next summer. So just trying to make sure kind of all systems are green lit and like good to go for when all of a sudden the volume starts ramping up.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not that you have necessarily anything.
And these are like really minor issues, but
again, we're all looking for performance, right? So I mean, checking in, it might not have to be, super crazy on tests, but I mean, reminding everyone that like, at least one blood test a year would be great. I don't know how many people come back with some sort of low iron, iron anemia, low ferritin type thing, red blood cells.
Yeah.
So getting all that checked, sometimes we have infections we didn't, realize, something's really off. The thyroid hormone's a common one for a lot of the older female ladies I work with.
Yeah, I was going to say I'll also campaign for this is the good time of year for women to head to their gynecologist for their annual exams if they haven't already. Mm-hmm. Sort of a good timing for that and having a discussion with your doctor or gynecologist about just what's up with you and anything that can be improved.
Yeah, so I think we're working on performance, but there's all those elements, right? It's like a wheel, and there's many spokes on the wheel. So you've probably been spending a lot of time on the training, the physical training element, but then we have our strength training and our overall health, maybe our sexual health.
You can't say that on here.
But social health, there's all these things that contribute to that overall wellness / performance, because all that stuff, like if, you're not putting time into those elements, those social elements, there's an element of deprivation there. And, we need to be healthy, well people to then base on that. So that's what the off season, if we're going to call it that. But again, I'm going to call it the preparation phase more so than the off season.
Yeah.
So we're going to take, Joe Friel uses the term transition. That's our 1 to 2 weeks where we sort of abstain from that bicycle and rebuild and be a little slothful. And again, most people shouldn't need more than 1 week, maybe 2. And then again, we phase in. We don't go back to full gas, maximal volume, whatever that is for you. But we phase back in and start working on those cross-training activities, strength training activities, getting our tests, getting nutrition sort of balanced, nice whole foods, all this stuff, right? There's a lot of work to be done in a lot of areas. We can all, we all have our spokes that are broken.
Yeah. I think my one last sort of, spoke, if we're going to go with that analogy, would be nutrition and diet, because I think during the season it's really easy to sort of convince yourself that there's like extra cookies or ride nutrition, and that's not necessarily wrong, but the off season is sort of an awesome opportunity to really focus in on cleaning that up, and not necessarily getting down to your race weight per se, but like getting to a place where you're really comfortable with what you weigh right now and how you're eating right now, and kind of developing those good habits. And if you have a little more time, maybe spend a little more time in the kitchen working on some, cool new recipes or salads or whatever, and, carry that into the rest of the season.
Yep, I think that makes sense.
Cool. All right, I think we're going to wrap up there. If anyone has any other questions, we have a page over at theconsummateathlete.com where you can submit them. We're going to be doing this about once a month, and we'd love to hear your questions. Anything else to add?
Can people check out your upcoming Saddle Sore book release?
Yeah, that's actually going to be coming up. We'll talk about that more probably next week's episode. I'm hoping I'll have an official release date, but there is a new edition of Saddle Sore with all of the stuff that I've talked about before as far as nether regions and the bike, but new chapters on pregnancy, post-pregnancy, menopause, and even a chapter for male cyclists and some of the issues that they face with regards to the undercarriage and the bike. So stay tuned for more on that, but I am really, really excited about it. Lots of cool new stuff in there. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, and catch you next time.